From 1955 to 1965, Chrysler built a race car every year and called it a luxury sedan. The 300J was the rarest of all of them. Here's why almost nobody knows it existed. To understand the 300J, you have to understand the strange decade that came before it. In 1955, Chrysler did something no other American manufacturer was doing at the time. They took their most powerful engine, dropped it into their most elegant body, and sold the result to ordinary customers walking into ordinary dealerships. They called it the C300. It wasn't marketed as a hot rod. It wasn't marketed as a race car. It was marketed as a luxury coupe. Full leather, full chrome, the works. And then it went out and won stock car championships against cars that actually were built for racing. That first year set a tone the rest of the industry simply wasn't playing by. Other manufacturers built dedicated performance models and dedicated luxury models and kept the two identities separate. A buyer chose one lane or the other. Chrysler's letter series refused that choice entirely. It insisted a car could be both at once and then proved the point on a racetrack instead of just claiming it in an advertisement. That refusal to pick a lane is what gave the series its identity, and it's exactly what would eventually make the 300J such an extreme expression of the idea. That contradiction became the entire identity of the letter series. Every year, Chrysler gave the car a new letter: 300B, 300C, 300D, and so on. And every year, the formula stayed the same. Take the biggest engine in the lineup, tune it harder than anything else Chrysler sold, wrap it in a body nobody would ever mistake for a race car, and quietly let it go compete anyway. At Daytona, at Darlington, on the Salt Flats, wherever speed could be measured and a record could be claimed. By the time the alphabet reached J in 1963, the letter series had been running for 8 years, and Chrysler had refined the formula about as far as it would go. This is where the story gets specific and where it gets strange. The 300J was powered by a 413 cubic inch Wedge V8, tuned to produce 390 horsepower, the most powerful engine ever fitted to a letter series car up to that point. It came with a cross-ram intake manifold, a setup that used long, tuned intake runners to build torque at exactly the RPM range where American highways demanded it. On paper, it was simply the next step in a well-established formula. In practice, it was the point where the formula finally outran itself. That cross-ram design deserves a moment of its own, because it wasn't just a performance flourish, it was Chrysler solving a very specific problem. A big inch V8 that only made power at high RPM would have been thrilling on a racetrack and miserable in daily traffic. The long-tuned intake runners on the 413 pulled torque down into the range where the car actually got driven, which meant the 300J could set records at Daytona on a Saturday and still pull smoothly away from a stoplight on a Monday commute. It was engineering built to serve both identities of the car at once, exactly the double life the entire letter series had been living since 1955. Here's the detail that made the 300J different from every letter series car before or since, and it's the kind of detail that sounds backwards until you understand the engineering behind it. The 300J was the only Chrysler letter car in the entire 10-year run that was never offered with a manual transmission, not as an option buyer skipped, not as a rare configuration that got discontinued. It was simply never available, full stop, from the first car built to the last. Hold that fact for a moment, because the reason behind it tells you everything about how far Chrysler had pushed this car. The 413 Wedge in J-Spec produced so much torque, delivered so low in the rev range, that Chrysler's available manual gearboxes at the time simply weren't rated to survive it. Every manual transmission in Chrysler's parts bin had a torque ceiling, and the J's engine sat above it. Rather than detune the engine to fit the transmission, which would have defeated the entire point of building the most powerful letter car yet, Chrysler made the opposite choice. They removed the manual option entirely and sent every single 300J out the factory door with a heavy-duty 3-speed TorqueFlite automatic, the only transmission in their lineup that could actually handle what the engine was doing. Think about what that means for a car built in 1963, at a moment in American car culture when a manual gearbox was still considered the serious enthusiast choice. Chrysler had built an engine so aggressive that the manual gearbox, the supposedly more capable option, physically could not survive behind it. The automatic wasn't the compromise. The automatic was the only thing strong enough for the job. And it wasn't just fast on paper. Chrysler brought the 300J to Daytona Beach, where the letter series had already built a decade of speed record credibility, and used it to set new speed records in the standing start and flying mile categories for American production automobiles. This wasn't a factory-modified test mule wearing the same badge as the showroom car. Aside from the equipment required to log an official record run, the cars that set those Daytona times were fundamentally the same 300J a customer could special order and drive home. That distinction mattered enormously to the letter series credibility, and it's easy to overlook from decades away. Plenty of manufacturers then and now have built one-off record cars that share nothing but a badge with what's actually sold to the public. Chrysler's approach was almost the opposite of that marketing shortcut. The whole point of running production spec cars at Daytona was to make the record mean something to the person standing in the dealership, prove that the car in the showroom really could do what the advertisement claimed, not a fantasy built around a heavily modified prototype. That's what made the letter series genuinely unique in American automotive history, and it's worth sitting with for a second because nothing quite like it exists today. This wasn't a limited edition trim package built to chase a marketing headline. It was a genuine factory racing program, run in complete parallel with Chrysler's ordinary luxury car business, using the same dealer network, the same financing, the same showroom floor. A customer in 1963 could walk into a Chrysler dealership, sign the same paperwork they'd sign for any other car, and drive away in a machine that had, weeks earlier, been setting speed records on a public beach in Florida. So why does almost nobody remember any of this today? Part of the answer is simply arithmetic. Chrysler built only 400 units of the 300J, the lowest production figure of any letter series car across the entire 10-year run. Compare that to the tens of thousands of ordinary Chrysler sedans rolling off the same assembly lines that year, and the 300J was never going to dominate public memory through sheer visibility. It was a whisper inside a much louder conversation. But scarcity alone doesn't erase a car from history. Plenty of rare cars stay famous specifically because they're rare. What actually buried the letter series was something closer to a deliberate business decision than an accident of low production numbers. By the mid-1960s, Chrysler's marketing priorities had shifted hard towards volume, towards mainstream family sedans and the earliest stirrings of what would become the muscle car boom. The letter series, expensive to build, low volume, and increasingly out of step with where the market and Chrysler's own advertising budget were heading, stopped fitting the story the company wanted to tell about itself. After the series quietly ended in 1965, Chrysler's own promotional materials largely stopped referencing it. No retrospective ad campaigns, no heritage tie-ins to new models. The decade-long identity of building race cars disguised as luxury cars simply stopped being part of how Chrysler talked about Chrysler. That silence compounded over decades. Each generation of Chrysler advertising built on the previous one, and none of them reached back to reclaim the letter series as part of the brand story. Meanwhile, the muscle car era that followed produced its own icons, cars with marketing machines, movie appearances, and reissues that kept them in public consciousness for 60 years. The letter series had none of that. It had no reissue, no cultural relaunch, nothing keeping the name in front of new generations of buyers. It simply stopped being talked about, and a car that stops being talked about eventually stops being remembered, no matter how genuinely significant it was when new. There's a certain irony in how this played out. The muscle cars that eclipsed the letter series in public memory were in many ways chasing the same idea Chrysler had already proven a decade earlier, that a factory could build something genuinely fast and sell it to regular buyers through regular dealerships. But those later cars arrived with youth-focused marketing campaigns built specifically to be remembered, while the letter series had been sold to an older, more conservative luxury buyer who was never the audience a nostalgia campaign would eventually chase. The car that arguably started the whole idea got left out of the story that idea eventually became. Today, that forgotten status has become part of what makes the 300J so valuable to the people who do know about it. Because so few were built, and because so few of those 400 have survived in original, documented condition, a genuine 300J with verified history now commands somewhere between $110,000 and $180,000 at auction, depending on documentation, originality, and condition. That's a serious number for a car most Americans have never heard of, and it's a number driven almost entirely by collectors who understand exactly what they're looking at. The rarest chapter of a 10-year experiment where a major American manufacturer quietly ran a factory racing program out of ordinary dealerships, then let the entire story fade from its own history. The letter series ended in 1965, 2 years after the J. By then, the formula that started with the C300 in 1955 had run its full course: bigger engines, faster records, smaller and smaller production numbers, until the math simply stopped making sense for a company moving towards a different kind of future. The 300J sits right near the end of that arc, the most powerful engine the series had yet produced, the rarest production run of any letter car, and the only one Chrysler built without offering a manual transmission. Not because buyers didn't want one, but because nothing in the parts bin could survive what the engine was doing. It's a strange kind of legacy. A car fast enough to need an automatic transmission just to stay in one piece. Built in numbers small enough to nearly disappear from memory. Sold by a company that would spend the next several decades barely mentioning it existed. For the most of the driving public, the 300J simply isn't part of the story of American cars. For the people who've tracked down one of the roughly 400 that were built, it's one of the most complete answers to a question almost nobody thinks to ask. What happens to a luxury car company decides for exactly 10 years to also secretly be a race team? Maybe that's the real reason the 300J is worth remembering now, even if Chrysler itself spent decades not bothering to. It's not just a rare car or a fast car. It's physical proof of a business decision that doesn't really get made anymore. A major manufacturer, at the height of its influence, chose to spend a decade building the fastest car it possibly could, then sell it through the same showroom as everything else, with no separate brand, no separate marketing budget, no attempt to make the racing pedigree the headline. It just quietly built the best version of the idea it could, year after year, until the letter ran out and the company moved on to something else entirely. 400 of these cars exist because Chrysler decided, for one specific year in a 10-year experiment, that this was as far as the formula could go. The most power, the least compromise, and a transmission decision that only makes sense once you understand exactly how hard that engine was pushing. Nobody set out to make the 300J forgettable. It just happened to be the rarest chapter of a story the company that built it eventually stopped telling.